Hello there and welcome. Today we're going to be having a little chat about this book here, Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. Apologies, I don't have the physical copy this time because I read it on my Kindle. But this is a short story compilation from 1985, so it contains a lot of Stephen's early work, the kind of stuff he was doing piecemeal, submitting to men's magazines and the like, and anthologies, things like that. So stuff that he wasn't really getting paid very much for at all. I suppose at the time he never envisaged it would ever make its way into a compilation. In fact, the first run of this book in 1985 only ran to 1,000 copies, but I'm pretty sure it's been in print ever since. In fact, you can buy a new copy of it right now on Amazon, and I advise that you do because it's absolutely brilliant, or at least I think so. So it contains 22 different stories. It starts off with a novella, the famous story The Mist, and various other short stories encompassing various genres, mostly horror, obviously, but there's also a bit of kind of dark science fiction and a few other ones that don't really fit into any kind of characterization at all, but are interesting nonetheless. So I didn't like all of them, but the majority are very good indeed. And there's 3 or 4 in particular that I thought were very good indeed. But first of all, I'm going to just do a tiny little bit of criticism. And that's going to be for the very first novella, The Mist. So there won't be any spoilers in any of this that I'm going to do, so don't worry about that. So The Mist, as a premise, it's about a husband and wife and their small child, their son. They live beside a lake somewhere in Maine. I don't know if it's an actual place or not. I don't know. But anyway, he's a kind of freelance illustrator, and this storm comes to the area. And shortly thereafter it heralds the arrival of a very strange mist that rolls in across the lake. The mist is very strange indeed because, as the protagonist describes in the book, it has a very perfectly straight edge to it and comes across enveloping everything in its path. This mist isn't a good thing. Now, the interesting thing, the best part about the story, I thought, was the association with a military research facility that's in the area called the Arrowhead Project. And so the suggestion is that this storm that happened in the area has disrupted something that was going on there, some experiment that's gone wrong. What ends up happening is this mist becomes a kind of deadly thing. The mist itself doesn't kill people, but once people go into the mist, it's not long before they do get nobbled. By what, I will not say, but I will say this, various strange and horrible creatures. So God knows what they were working on. There is a suggestion that maybe they've opened a portal to another dimension, which is quite interesting. So the interesting part for me about the story was those associations with the Arrowhead Project and what might have happened and whether they can escape from this situation. Now, the criticism I level at this particular novella is Stephen King's tendency at times to ramble a little. And it's something that he acknowledges actually in the back of the book. There's a notes section where he talks about some of these stories. And I think he describes it as elephantitis that he suffers from, where he talks too much, I suppose, describes too much, gets too invested in the characters and their various interplaying dramas. This is something that can suffer in his novels as well, but in a novella, I didn't think it would be there, but it was. And it can distract a little from the story itself. But the short story format is definitely his strong point. The other thing is with his novels, as I understand it, he doesn't tend to plan his work at all. He has a very tenuous idea at the beginning, perhaps a very strong idea to start the story off, but no real conception of how the story might end, and that can be to the detriment of his work sometimes. If you've ever read The Stand, which is an absolutely brilliant book, in my opinion, the ending on that leaves a lot to be desired. It's quite ridiculous. But anyway, that's another matter altogether. So, yeah, The Mist is perhaps, it's a very good story, but I was disappointed that the elephantitis reared its ugly elephant head. The other stories don't suffer from that at all, really. And the ideas are really good and very interesting indeed. So I'm going to talk now about 4 of my very favourite ones. And I'm going to begin with The Jaunt. So this is a science fiction story with a relatively dark ending, which I won't talk about. But it's about teleportation. And so it's set in the future whereby teleportation is not only possible, but it's very cheap to do. So it hardly takes any energy at all, which is, the science in this is ludicrous. I mean, it's quite absurd. And it's also, the laughable thing is, they say that they discovered oil reserves on various other planets, including Venus, which even during the 80s they knew that it was a hellhole that would be almost impossible to do anything with, let alone mining for oil on it. But aside from the dodgy science in it, there was a really interesting concept in the idea of teleportation over any kind of distance, almost instantaneous travel from point to point. But the idea that you've got to be anaesthetized, you've got to be knocked out before you go through the procedure. If you don't, something terrible happens. And really this story is all geared up to finding out what that is. And when you find out what it is, it's a really interesting and terrifying idea. But that's an example of King's science fiction actually is very good. I mean, this isn't a good example in terms of its how good the science is in it, but a lot, say like the Running Man, for example, that was really good. He was very good at dystopian science fiction. Anyway, that's The Jaunt. Really enjoyed that. The next one is The Raft. So this was one that he wrote for a magazine, I believe, but was never, to his knowledge, actually published. But he rewrote it years later. And I believe this was turned into a TV drama at some point. Anyway, it's about these kind of 2 college couples, I suppose, and they take a day out and they decide to go swimming drunkenly, and they swim out to this raft, which is in a kind of not abandoned, but out of season holiday camp. So it's on a lake. There's a raft, and they get this brilliant idea to swim out to it, just for the fucking hell of it. Once they get to this raft, they notice a very strange thing lurking in the lake, almost perfectly circular darkness within the lake, which is moving around. Now, this entity is malignant, to say the least, and it, let's say, terrorizes the 2 young couples. Not the nicest of endings either, but there we are. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. All of these have pretty dark endings, but that was is very well written, and the things that happen to these unfortunate people, it's very well described, and my God, you would not want to be in that situation. Yes, so that was The Raft. The next one, which was really interesting, was Survivor Type. Now, this was the whole reason I read this selection of short stories in the first place, because I'd heard of this story randomly from somewhere. And the premise is brilliant. So it's a kind of disgraced doctor, I think you could say. And he's kind of lived his life playing fast and loose with the rules, so to speak. He's come from a kind of unfortunate background. He's had to fight his way into the medical profession by making money where he can. When we meet him, he's marooned on a tiny little island with bugger all there. I mean, nothing to eat as such, because the ship he was sailing on sank. Now, while he was on this ship, he was doing a drug run. So he was trying to bring in some, I think it was cocaine, no, it's heroin, from Thailand or Vietnam or somewhere. I think it was Vietnam, actually. So he was washed up on this island with his first aid kit, I suppose you could say, or his doctor's paraphernalia, and a couple of kilos of heroin. So it's about, really, cannibalism or auto-cannibalism. Now, that's all I'm going to say on the matter, but your mind's probably working already. So a doctor that knows what he's doing, how much of himself could he consume without killing himself? It's not a very long story, but it really packs a punch. That's another thing I like about Stephen King's work. He has these ideas and then he runs it out to the nth degree. He just takes it right there and pushes it further and further. That one was really great. But my favourite story was Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. Now, as a title, I didn't expect much from this. I thought it was quite an uninspiring title. But once I got into the story, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's told from the perspective of a conversation between two old gentlemen. That again, it's a kind of a lakeside community, but lots of holiday homes, so more affluent, the rich middle classes that spend their summers there and then they fuck off back home during the winter. These gentlemen are the ones, the caretakers, gardeners, those kind of people that service these rich people. Anyway, it's a conversation about the wife of one of these couples, affluent couples, and the fact that she disappeared a number of years ago and what might have happened to her. Now, I'm not going to tell you how it ends at all or what possibly happened to this woman, but it's all centered around the wife being obsessed with getting the shortest route between their summer house and their main residence in another town. So it's a journey of around 70 odd miles, I think, as the crow flies, so point to point. And it's about her trying to find the shortest route between those 2 points using whatever roads she can find. So like old logging routes and, forgotten country lanes, things like that. And she drives this little old sports car and drives like a mad bastard. Anyways, she befriends this gentleman that's telling the story and tells him about her obsession. She scrutinizes maps all the time, Ordnance Survey maps and what have you. And each time she says, she's got it a bit shorter. So she's resetting the trip odometer on her car and each time gets it slightly shorter. Now, the really interesting thing is she gets to the point where the distance she achieves between those points is less than the distance if you were to draw a straight line between those 2 points. So obviously an impossible feat. So the mind boggles. I mean, how is she achieving this? But the main chap that's telling the story actually goes along for a ride with her and you get an inkling as to what's going on. Absolutely brilliant. It's so well written and the idea was so original. This was Stephen King at his very best, I think, that story. It's worth reading just for that one story. There's a reason why Stephen King is as popular as he is, and he's sold countless millions of books. Not only is he consistent, not only has he got an imagination to die for, but it just keeps going. The quality is always there, and occasionally he's better than that. He's even better, and this is an example of where he excels himself. There's various other books that you could mention that this is true of as well. I think some people have negative things to say about Stephen King, perhaps because he's so popular. I think that they're a bit sniffy about him for that reason. Perhaps they're also jealous of him, perhaps. I know you can get a bit of fatigue from reading too much of him. I know I went through a phase where I absolutely loved reading his stuff, and after a few books in a row, you may tire slightly of his style, perhaps. But every now and then, I always get another Stephen King book and just devour it because they're always so good. But anyway, his short stories are brilliant, and I'm going to seek out some more in the future. Because I'm writing my own short stories at the moment, so I thought it's about time I start reading some of the masterwork, the masters like Stephen King. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the matter. I hope you seek it out if you're interested in that kind of writing. Right, I'll leave it there. I don't think you've made it this far if you're a new viewer, but if you are, occasionally I'll do these reviews. Whenever I finish a book, I'll review it on here. Otherwise, I'll be talking about my paintings mostly, or my writing. But it's a bit of a hodgepodge. There's all different things going on. So please subscribe if you're into any of that stuff. Right, I'm going to leave it there because I've already been rambling too long. Thanks for watching, and cheerio.